The unification of North and South Yemen on May 22, 1990, was welcomed across the Arab world as an unprecedented achievement, the first voluntary merger of two sovereign states in modern Arab history. It was an attempt to overcome the differences between two political systems that had developed along very different paths during the Cold War. North Yemen, officially the Yemen Arab Republic, was a conservative military regime dominated by tribal sheikhs and backed by Saudi Arabia and the West. South Yemen, the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, remained the only Marxist-led state ever established in the Arab world, with a legacy of centralized planning, secular governance, and close ties to the Soviet Union. The Unification Agreement created a fragile power-sharing arrangement that quickly revealed its flaws. While nominally establishing parity between northern and southern leadership, with northern President Ali Abdullah Saleh as head of state and southern leader Ali Salam Albi as his deputy, real power remained concentrated in Saleh's hands. The new constitution preserved the North's tribal patronage networks while dismantling the South's socialist institutions. Southern civil servants and military officers found themselves systematically marginalized, with key positions going to northern loyalists. This political exclusion was worsened by economic shock therapy imposed by the International Monetary Fund, which eliminated subsidies in privatized state enterprises, policies that hit hardest in the South where citizens had depended on government employment and social services. Tensions and political polarization grew as the Southern socialists found themselves marginalized in the new unified country, while President Saleh began to consolidate his power with the help of Islamists. Southern leaders grew increasingly vocal about northern domination of oil revenues, particularly from the newly discovered Masila oil fields located in former South Yemen. The breaking point came in April 1994 when Vice President Albi and other southern leaders withdrew to Aden and fighting broke out between North and South. The resulting civil war lasted just 2 months but revealed the profound imbalance of power between North and South. Saleh's forces, bolstered by Islamist militias and tribal fighters, quickly overwhelmed the southern resistance. As northern forces closed in on the South stronghold of Aden, the Southerners declared secession, creating the breakaway Democratic Republic of Yemen, which was only to last from May to July 1994. The northern conquest of Aden in July 1994 was particularly brutal, with looting and reprisals against former socialist officials. The war's aftermath saw a comprehensive purge of southern-influenced socialist parties were banned, southern military units disbanded, and the region's administration placed under direct northern control. Jihadists from Ayman al-Zawahiri's Egyptian Islamic Jihad began moving to Yemen after a crackdown in Egypt. In Yemen, Saleh found them useful in his fight against southern separatists. After using Islamic militants to help crush the South's Yemeni Socialist Party and keep the country under his rule, Saleh turned a blind eye to jihadist activities and allowed their sympathizers to work in his intelligence services. The South's failed secession attempt had lasting consequences for Yemen's political development. At the capital in Sana'a, southern grievances were dismissed as treason rather than addressed through reform. The war also strengthened the role of Islamist factions, particularly the Islah Party, which had supported Saleh against the godless socialists. Most significantly, it established a pattern of northern domination through military force rather than genuine power sharing, a pattern that would fuel southern resentment for decades and ultimately contribute to the complete collapse of the Yemeni state in 2014. The unification that began with optimism in 1990 had, within 4 short years, become a marriage of conquest rather than partnership. Saleh maintained power through both co-option and coercion. Tribal elites were bought off with economic privileges, while Islamist groups were tolerated as a counterweight to socialist influence. Military and security positions went to family members. Meanwhile, ordinary Yemenis suffered from soaring unemployment, water shortages, and a growing cut addiction crisis. By the 2000s, over 40% of Yemenis lived in poverty, with the state failing to provide basic services or economic opportunities. The regime treated state resources as private property, with oil revenues constituting over 70% of Yemen's budget being funneled into off-budget accounts controlled by Saleh's inner circle. Foreign aid and investment deals routinely included kickbacks, with contracts for infrastructure projects awarded to cronies who often delivered substandard work or abandoned projects after receiving payments. Meanwhile, Islamist factions, including future Al-Qaeda leaders, were tolerated and sometimes covertly supported as tools to undermine secular opponents. Many jihadists who fought for Saleh during the 1994 civil war were later pardoned or released from prison, inadvertently creating the nucleus of what would become Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. The southern regions of Yemen faced particularly harsh treatment under Saleh's regime. Aden and other former PDRY territories were economically strangled as punishment for the 1994 rebellion. Southern oil revenues were systematically diverted to Sana'a while local infrastructure was allowed to decay. Civil servants from the south were purged from government positions, and what remained of the region's industrial base was deliberately dismantled. This calculated neglect fueled growing resentment. Two major rebellions emerged in response to Saleh's rule. In the south, the Hirak movement protested northern domination through peaceful demonstrations that gradually turned violent under government repression. In the northern Sada province, Zaydi Shia rebels known as the Houthis launched a series of uprisings against government discrimination and Saudi-backed Salafist influence. The Houthi movement, formerly known as Ansar Allah, supporters of God, emerged from the rugged mountains of northern Yemen as both a religious revivalist group and a rebellion against state persecution. Its origins trace back to the 1990, when Hussein Badreddin al-Houthi, a Zaydi Shia cleric from Sada Governorate, began organizing educational programs to revive Zaydi traditions amid growing Salafist influence. What began as a cultural movement would transform into Yemen's most powerful armed faction, challenging the central government, resisting Saudi intervention, and reshaping the country's political landscape. Zaydism, a distinct school of Shia Islam dominant in northern Yemen, stands apart from both Sunni orthodoxy and other Shia traditions like Twelver Shiism. Named after Zayed ibn Ali, who led a rebellion against Umayyad rule in the 8th century, Zaydi believed that qualified descendants of the Prophet Muhammad can rise as imams through scholarly merit and armed resistance to tyranny. Theologically, Zaydism aligns closely with Sunni Mutazilism in its emphasis on rationalism, free will, and the created nature of the Quran, while maintaining Shia reverence for Imam Ali and his descendants. Historically, Zaydi imams ruled Yemen for over a millennium, blending religious authority with tribal governance, a legacy that continues to shape the Houthi movement's ideology today, even as it adapts to modern political struggles. By the 1990s, Zaydi, roughly 30% of Yemen's population, felt increasingly marginalized under Saleh's Sunni-dominated regime. Saudi-funded Salafist preachers poured into Sada, condemning Zaydi practices as heretical. Meanwhile, Saleh's government systematically excluded Zaydi from political and military positions. Hussein al-Houthi framed this as a long-standing persecution, rallying followers under the slogan, "God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews, victory to Islam." The movement's armed resistance began in 2004, when Saleh's government accused Hussein of forming a militant group. After refusing summons to Sana'a, Hussein was killed by the military, becoming a martyr and galvanizing the movement under his brother Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Over the next 6 years, the Houthis fought a series of fierce wars against Saleh's forces in Saudi-backed tribes. Their stronghold in Sada's rugged terrain neutralized state air superiority. They leveraged historic Zaydi tribal networks for supplies and recruits, while framing their fight as resistance to a kleptocratic regime backed by imperialist force. By 2010, a Saudi-mediated ceasefire ended the wars but left the Houthis de facto rulers of Sada. The Arab Spring protests that reached Yemen in early 2011 exposed the fatal contradictions of Ali Abdullah Saleh's 33-year regime. What began as peaceful demonstrations demanding reform quickly escalated into a nationwide uprising that fractured the regime, empowered new actors like the Houthis, and set the stage for total state collapse. Unlike Tunisia or Egypt, where revolutions played out over weeks, Yemen's crisis became a slow-motion unraveling, a revolution hijacked by elites, foreign powers, and armed groups that left the country more divided than ever. When security forces opened fire on demonstrators on March 18, killing 52 protesters in a single day, the movement radicalized. Saleh agreed to a Gulf Cooperation Council brokered deal, only to back away hours before the scheduled signing 3 times. After the third time, the GCC declared it was suspending its efforts to mediate in Yemen. Key tribal and military figures, including General Ali Mohsen al-Ahmar and the powerful al-Ahmar family, defected to the opposition. By late March, the protests had swelled to hundreds of thousands, with parallel sit-ins in Taiz, Aden, and Abe. The crisis reached its peak on June 3, when a bomb exploded in the presidential mosque during Friday prayers, severely burning Saleh and killing several bodyguards. The attack, likely orchestrated by tribal rivals or his own relatives, forced Saleh to flee to Saudi Arabia for medical treatment. With Saleh incapacitated, the Gulf Cooperation Council (GCC) brokered a power transfer deal in November 2011 that preserved the regime's core. In exchange for immunity, Saleh handed power to his vice president, Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi, a former general with no independent base. A National Dialogue Conference, 2013-2014, was established to draft a new constitution, but it excluded key factions, including southern separatists and many youth activists, while giving disproportionate influence to Saleh's cronies in the Islamist Islah party. As the political process stalled, the Houthis exploited the power vacuum. Positioning themselves as champions of the poor, they allied with Saleh, their former enemy, to undermine Hadi. When Hadi's government lifted fuel subsidies in July 2014, a condition of an IMF loan, the Houthis organized mass protests, framing it as proof of Hadi's corruption. By August, their fighters had swept into Sana'a, seizing ministries and military bases with little resistance. In January 2015, they placed Hadi under house arrest, dissolved parliament, and declared a revolutionary committee to govern Yemen. Hadi escaped to Aden in February 2015 and renounced his resignation, calling for international support. Saudi Arabia, fearing Iranian influence through the Houthis, launched Operation Decisive Storm in March, beginning a war that would dwarf the conflicts of the previous decade. The Arab Spring's promise had collapsed entirely. The old regime was gone, but what replaced it was not democracy, only a new form of warlordism.